Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations. The Lepanto Institute has caught the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops red-handed, using your tithing dollars to support an organization that fights in defense of the greatest evil of our age. This past summer, in June, the highest judicial body in the United States got rid of a past decision that permitted what I have to call here the Moloch ritual in every state without exception. The consequences of that decision for the church have been interesting, to say the least. Francis has been all but silent on the subject, despite the gravity and international headline-making part of the story. Catholic churches in the United States have been desecrated, and social strife has increased. The agents of chaos run rampant. Now, Michael Hitchborn of the Lepanto Institute just released on that organization's website a huge report showing that the USCCB is funding what amounts to an anti-Catholic organization with Catholic money that came out of your pocket when you tithed on Sundays. Let's get into the story, which I can't fully do justice to, so I invite you to read the report for yourself on the Lepanto website. I have a direct link to the article in today's show notes at returntotradition.org in the post for today's episode. Let's get into the story. But as we unfortunately do have to do from time to time, let's check in with Paca Papa Francis, who imparts upon us, the faithful, some nakedly pagan wisdom. In fact, often the pagans from history had better wisdom than this to impart upon the world, and so be ready for this. From the official Francis Twitter account, quote, "The plant paradigm takes a different approach to earth and environment. Plants cooperate with all the surrounding environment. Even when they compete, they cooperate for the good of the ecosystem. Let's learn from the meekness of plants. Hashtag economy of Francesco, hashtag time of creation," end quote. Oh yes, putting agency onto plants, that's great. Thanks, Francis, I hate it. But with leadership like this, the story I have for you won't be of any real surprise either, all things considered. Now, should it surprise you that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops were caught red-handed supporting financially the greatest evil of our age? It shouldn't surprise you at all. The kind of thinking betrayed by Francis's tweet, which was just a segment of a talk he gave somewhere recently, is part and parcel of the thinking that allows the USCCB to fund evil in direct contravention of the teachings of the magisterium of the Catholic Church. Before we dive into this report, let's go over some of the acronyms that you'll see in the report to make things easier. The USCCB is the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, and that is the official organization of the U.S. bishops, where they all meet as a group to decide national church issues, as well as to support various Catholic charitable programs and to decide church policies of various kinds. The CCHD is a Catholic Campaign for Human Development, which is essentially a USCCB charitable organization that takes church funds and uses it for various Catholic social and economic justice issues. You're familiar with the litany of these things almost certainly. We're talking here about things like helping the poor, defending human dignity, life. You name an area where church concerns overlap with secular concerns. That's what the CCHD is supposed to be used for. And the other acronym to know is FIA, or Faith in Action, an allegedly Christian nonprofit. And I say allegedly because Lepanto Institute caught them publicly accepting U.S. bishops' money to defend and fight for what we have to call the Moloch ritual here, due to our host's rather silly sensitivities. In fact, in reading this report, I have to be careful and swap some words out so as to not get in trouble. But this report reveals that the USCCB are either incompetent or just don't care, and are happy to support evil in the United States. Take your pick. Those are really the only options. From the report, quote, "The Catholic Campaign for Human Development, CCHD, which is the official anti-poverty program of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, USCCB, has given millions of dollars over the years to organizations that promote the Moloch ritual, chemical barriers to God's great command of us being fruitful and multiplying, the James Martin sin, and the hammer and sickle ideology. And each time the CCHD is caught handing funds to an organization acting in direct contravention of the Church's moral and social mission, the CCHD either ignores or lies about what was discovered. This report will show that one of the CCHD's most favored networks not only has a history of promoting grave immorality, but is currently working to enshrine access to the Moloch ritual as a quote-unquote rite. The organization in question is called Faith in Action, FIA. Formerly called the PICO Network, FIA has 29 affiliate members, many of which collectively receive hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. In 2016, what was still called the PICO Network, the CCHD granted the network $500,000. Not only is FIA one of the CCHD's most favored networks, but the CCHD has publicly praised the network on several occasions. And even after being presented with detailed facts regarding FIA's gravely immoral activities, CCHD produced an internal memo vigorously defending Faith in Action. But now, with CCHD's cash, CCHD's adulations, and with CCHD's ardent defense, Faith in Action has taken a formal position endorsing the Moloch ritual as a rite, vowing to defend the right to access to that ritual. The CCHD has granted millions of dollars to affiliates of Faith in Action over the years. Since 2016, in addition to the $500,000 strategic grant CCHD provided to the entire network, FIA organizations have collectively received $4,835,000 US. Currently, the CCHD is funding 14 affiliates of Faith in Action to the tune of $675,000. End quote. And then in the report, Lepanto goes by individual subgroups of FIA that receive money. That again comes from the U.S. bishops, and because that comes from you. And this organization has publicly come out in defense of the Moloch ritual, condemning the court decision made in June that resulted in the overt persecution of Catholic churches around the United States by that group promising vengeance that named themselves after someone calling themselves Jane. I'm not sure who that is, really, except maybe a reference to Jane Doe, the typical name for the generic woman when you see a missing persons case or something on TV. On the day that decision came down from the court, Faith in Action took to social media to condemn it, saying it was oppressive and evil and all the rest of the typical nonsense language that they use. But then they went and made it worse. To give you an idea of just how depraved this organization is, they say that God is okay with the Moloch ritual. Yeah, think about that for a second. If by God they actually mean Moloch, then sure, I agree. Their demonic overlord is quite happy with that ritual being widespread available in the culture for little cost, which hasn't changed in the past few months anyway since the court decision. From the Lepanto report, quote, FIA's executive director, Reverend Alvin Herring, called the decision, quote, a huge blow to women in this season of despair, and declared that, quote, we must speak out against the dangerous policies that chip away at having agency over their own bodies. Reverend Dr. Cassandra Gould, FIA's senior strategist at FIA Washington's D.C. office, claimed that, quote, this decision was legalized judicially enforced oppression that shows contempt for the Creator, end quote. Contempt for the Creator. Official Faith in Action public releases cite Protestant pastors of various kinds, often women, saying that this decision was evil because it harmed people who are not of the majority in the country in terms of ethnicity and similar ways society measures such things at this time. These quote-unquote pastors made the decision somewhere to not submit to their faith in entirety, including their politics and making their politics actually make sense with the faith. They decided to not do that. Instead, they changed the faith into something new to conform to their political opinions. And I suppose they're free to do that in the sense that they have free will, but one day they will stand before the throne of Almighty God to explain what made them think that our blessed Lord would be okay with the Moloch ritual. So, to be clear, your tithe dollars go to fund an evil condemned by every pope in the church in the modern era. And yes, we'll even include Francis in that as well, since he has rather famously made remarks against that evil ritual. Yet the bishops remain silent on the report, and probably will, hoping it will all go away. This is partially why the bishops have no patience for traditional Catholics, and why they didn't invite us to participate in their silly little synod on synodality. We cling to the old religion, not the new. And in the faith from before the start of these dark times, this would never have been permitted. We don't live in those better times. We live in the times that a great many saints should be rising from. These events are predictable in our age of rampant modernism, yet we feign surprise instead of just shaking our head about this. Perhaps we wish for better and try to assume the best about our leadership in the church, even if, frankly, they always fail to live up to their responsibility. Then again, no one should be surprised by this turn of events. This image was posted by the official Synod Twitter account that is run by someone in the Vatican. That is an officially sanctioned image, and the other images that accompany it are all filled with secular language about justice and all the rest of that stuff that we're all so tired of. All the buzzwords that we hear so often these days that it's almost bewildering when not even the church is a sanctuary from the false gospel of the world. That's why none of this should surprise us. The USCCB is often a pretty worthless organization that tries to figure out how to be obedient to Francis, because obedience, remember, is the highest value in the church these days. Not fidelity to the gospel, but obedience to the earthly authority. They try to figure out how to do that while not being exactly disobedient either. If that's confusing, try following the movements of the USCCB. Everything we see from them now in our time is pretty bad in this way. By the way, that image was posted to official social media accounts on the Feast of Our Lady of Walsingham, an important Marian feast day in the United Kingdom. The modernists always do this stuff on Marian feast days. I don't think they do it consciously either. Yet no one seems willing to ask the basic questions that come from this. Do these bishops have the faith? Do the few that do have the spine and intestinal fortitude required to defend the faith from the enemy within the church? So will you continue to give to the U.S. bishops? Friendly reminder that your tithe gets taxed by the Archdiocese, who then sends some money to the USCCB in addition to the CCHD fundraisers that the USCCB does every year. Will you give to them, knowing what you know now? Well, let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help, as the sharing these messages on social media. You support the work of this channel on Patreon if you like. It'd be greatly appreciated. Options for that and alternatives to that are in the description box below. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.